Hello and welcome everyone to today's last session. It's about Microsoft Power BI. My name is Gerhard Brueckl and I will do the presentation for you. I come from Austria. I'm working with Microsoft BI for 7 years now. I'm basically an analysis services guy, so most of my products are to do with analysis services. And of course also reporting in terms of reporting services, Excel services, and so on. I'm working for a company called P1. It's located in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and we are a consultancy. You may know me. I blog at brueckl.wordpress.com, and if you have any questions or want to drop an email, you also have my email here. For those of you who know me, this session will not be very technical. It's like an overview of Power BI, its features, its tools. It's not like a deep dive to MDX or DAX, what I would usually do. So don't be disappointed. And yeah, what you're going to see in this session. The session is about Power BI. How many of you know Power BI? Oh, expected more to be honest. Okay. Who of you know Powerpivot and Power Query? Okay, that's more. So both Powerpivot, Power Query, Power Map, and Power View are all tools that are used together or in the context of Power BI, which allow power users to create and share reports, basically Excel reports. So the first thing that we will see is how to create the report, how to get the data, how to visualize it. The next step would be how to share the data, because if I build a report, of course I want someone to see it, or I want to present it to someone, to an audience, to my colleagues. And what's also important, especially in terms of self-service BI, is that what happens very likely is that all of your employees are building their separate reports, and it's very hard to control which data are they using, is it the correct data, and so on. And Power BI also has some special features on how to control these data sources. So this will be the administration part. So what is Power BI? Most of the people know Powerpivot, Power Query, and those like Excel tools that have been there for quite a long time by now. I think Powerpivot is like 3 years old. And these tools are basically used to create the reports. So power users that know the data, that know how the data correlates, they create the report. Right? And the next thing is to share those reports. Collaboration. How many of you already use SharePoint? Are there also some here that use SharePoint Online already? That's not much. Okay. Yeah. For Power BI, SharePoint Online is the collaboration platform. So reports and queries and everything is stored and shared in SharePoint Online. And the last thing, as I mentioned before, is the administration, which is basically for the IT people that need to control the access to the data sources, see how often the data source is used, and just to know, okay, like some queries or some analysis may only be relevant for a certain time. So, for example, a specific event happens, and I have to do special analysis to meet the requirements that I have on my data to analyze the data that this event produces. Like for example, I will show a short example about the Olympic Games. So in London last year, and this is a special event for London. So like if you are a retailer in London, 2012 is probably a better year than the years before, because you had the Olympic Games, there were a lot of tourists there, you have better sales. But now, like in 2013, this special analysis may not be required anymore, because there are no Olympic Games in 2013 in London. So, and by controlling and monitoring all the queries and data sources, you can delete or archive old queries, data, basically. So what does a usual BI architecture look like? You have some place where you store your files. You have usually Excel in one or the other way, and you have some data, like on-premise data or wherever you store your data. So the difference to Power BI is, or what does this architecture look like with Power BI? The collaborations thing, as I said, is SharePoint Online. Excel is used in a special version, let's call it like that. It's Office 365, which is basically Office 2013, but is a bit more better connected just to SharePoint Online and Power BI. And then we have all the tools that you already know. We have Power View, we have Power Query, we have Powerpivot, and Power Map. Those are the tools that we are basically working with. And that connect, of course, to Excel. But most people don't know that there is a special app, Power BI app in SharePoint Online that is used to collect all the data that the business users create, and it's distributed via SharePoint Online and in combination with that Power BI app. We'll see all of this later in some demos. In order to connect to special data sources, Power BI also features the concept of a gateway. So you can install a gateway in any data source you may have, and connect this data directly into your Power BI architecture. Which means that, for example, you would have a relational database like SQL Server, and by adding it to the Power BI environment, you're able to search for tables in the database using Excel and Power Query. So it's like you have one point of truth, so one point where you have all the data and data connections stored. This can be very easily queried using Power Query. So yes, Power Query is already the first tool that we are using. We have Power Query to get the data, Powerpivot to model and design the data, and we have Power View and Power Map to visualize the data. What Power Query in combination with Power BI does is that it extends its functionality, which allows you to explore the data that is available in your organization, that is available in Power BI, and this data you can use. You can extract it from the data source, from basically wherever it resides. You can do simple transformation, and in the end you can load it to either Excel or Powerpivot usually. So Powerpivot is then usually sourced in a Power BI environment by Power Query, and Powerpivot is used to, as I said, model and combine the data. So you may use Power Query to connect to 20 different sources. So you somehow have to combine it to make analysis possible. And Powerpivot is the tool for us. What many people don't think of Powerpivot is that it also stores the data. So it's also used as a data store in terms of Power BI. So it stores your analytical model, which is then distributed using SharePoint Online. And at the end of this chain, we have Power View and Power Map, which are used to visualize and explore the data, interact with the data, just to make the data and the information more visible and more easier to read for the end user. Then we have our collaboration features. Which is basically SharePoint Online. If you know SharePoint Online, you can store your data there, share it, get notifications whenever something changes. So everything that you know from SharePoint already is also available in SharePoint Online, and to a certain point also with Power BI. Then you have special Power BI sites to collect all the content within your SharePoint Online site. You have Power Q&A. Has anybody already heard of Power Q&A? Okay, so much. It's basically a natural language search, so you can just say, okay, what's the number of cars sold in 2012? And Power Q&A will give you a chart like representing that question based on the data that you have uploaded to Power BI. Then you have a mobile app. Like mobile is getting more and more important for all of our customers. Everybody wants. I want to have a record on the iPad, right? So there's also a mobile BI app that features or is built to serve those customers. And the last thing about collaboration is so-called shared queries, which I will talk about later in the administration part. So basically, Power BI is an app for SharePoint. So you can just, if you're familiar with SharePoint, you can add a document library to your site, you can add a calendar to your site, and you can also add the Power BI application to your site. And this includes the Power BI site itself, which is used to view and explore the available data. It features the Q&A, where you have those natural language search, right? And you have the mobile BI app, which is all like somehow part of the Power BI app. And the last thing are all those administrative features in terms of data management, where the data comes from, who's allowed to see it, in terms of security. So it's all concentrated on a single point. It's in the web, and it's very easy to see what data sources are really used. And you have what's also very important, integrated monitoring. So all the data about usage statistics and stuff like that is exposed using OData, which can then be used in like Power Query or Powerpivot again to analyze the data in a more beautiful way. These are like the basic features that come with Power BI or are part of Power BI. And now we're going to jump into more detail. So the first thing that you're going to see is Power Query. Power Query is the ETL tool for Power BI. It's used to share, get the data, load it. It supports at the moment Excel 2010 and Excel 2013, which is similar to Office 365. It is fully integrated into Excel and also in Power BI. It's free, so you can download it if you want to and use it without Power BI. It's also possible. And so your Power Query allows you to get data from like almost anywhere. You can use any Hadoop cluster if you want to. You can use SQL tables. You can use CSV files. You can use OData. You can use Azure Data Market. So I haven't found any major data source that's not supported. Once you selected your data and you loaded your data, you have very simple transformations that you can do with Power Query, which is like filtering and sorting, merging, appending, all those basic stuff. And what's very important is that everything that you do in this really nice wizard, this Power Query, is in the end expressed in a script language called M. And if you're very, more familiar with M and Power Query, you can also write like your own transformations. You can write custom functions, for example. So that's really it's for the advanced users already. So it is like you have this simple wizard that guides you or guides the normal users through its steps, but you can also use the M language to do more sophisticated transformations. And in the end, you load the data either into Excel, you can load it directly into Powerpivot, and you can also store and reuse the query, either the query alone or the query which is used in the Powerpivot model. Okay, so let's do a little demo on Power Query. So Power Query itself integrates itself into the Excel ribbon, shows up on the top, as you can see here, and you have various data sources that you can use. For our scenario, we will use data from United Nations. That's about population data, like how many people lived in each country for a given year. We will use that data. As you can see, it's from the web. So you can query Excel sheets and everything also from the web. So what we need to do is we create a new Power Query. Say, okay, we'll have data from the web. I hope it works as we are on wireless. So, and it shows me which worksheets are actually in that workbook. I'm interested into the estimates. The estimates are actually the population from 1950 till 2010. As you can see, it's not like a very convenient format to work with. The Power Query gives us the tools and the possibilities to translate this workbook into a readable, technically readable table. So first thing we're going to do is that we can remove the first columns, which do not contain any necessary data for us. And we can say, okay, use the first rows as our column headers. So, and basically, now we have our table. That's it. There are other tools or other features that are very important, like, as you can see, you have like, for each year I have one column, and it's easier to work with the data if it's like pivotized or unpivotized actually. So, there is a built-in feature to unpivot data, which I will use right now. So you can see all those transformations you can do in the wizard. And in order to make it correct, you can convert numbers, or you can convert data types to say, okay, those columns are actually numbers. So what we see, okay, we got an error because for some reason the last column couldn't be translated to a number. The reason for this is that there were blanks within the characters. So in Power Query you also have on the right side you have the pane, which means each step that you click in the wizard just is a step on the right side. And you can delete the single steps, you can move them around, and whenever you click on one of those steps you see what the result looked like after the step. So, as we know, we have a problem with our value converting to number, so we can just say, okay, replace our blanks by nothing, which makes it a readable number, a convertible number, and then we can just go to our next step, and now it works just fine. So, we can remove some unused columns. Rename it. And we already have our data. One thing here is that, for those of you who are familiar with Excel, all the features that you know from an Excel table are basically also available here. So you can use like number filters, say less than 900 or whatever, to further filter the data. So I call this population. And yeah, that's it. That's my data set. It's loading. The file is like, I think it's 4 or 5 megabytes, but you see it's still fast, it's over the wireless. So now we're done. So what we can do with this data now, as I said before, you can, if you are connected to Power BI, you can share this query. You make it accessible for all other users within your organization, or only to specific users if you want to, and they can use your query. So you do not have to reinvent the wheel twice. You can just reuse queries that, like, data steward or someone who's familiar with the data created for you. Okay. So, small query, we have this one. So the next thing is Powerpivot. Powerpivot is like the tool for Microsoft Excel and self-service BI. It features all the data modeling, combining, and it's blazingly fast. The reason why it's blazingly fast is because it uses X-Velocity. X-Velocity is an in-memory column store which uses very high compression and thereby delivering very high performance. So every of your analysis and models that you build are probably very fast, even if you work with millions of data. The main strength of Powerpivot is that you can use it to combine any data you may have, as long as you have some matching criteria. And what's also very important for the Powerpivot is text. Like, that's the language how you write your business logic. You do calculations and stuff like that. So what does it look like? Again, I have any kind of source. It could be a Power Query. It could be any other query. It could be SQL database, etc. And it also features so-called internal sources. So as we are working within Excel, and you may already have a table in Excel. You can just take this Excel table and move it into Powerpivot, and then combine it with your SQL data or analysis services data, or your Power Query data. And it allows you to create hierarchies, create measures, special calculations, time logics, and so on. So it's basically it is basically like analysis services tabular model. It uses the same technology, so everything you can do here, you can also do with analysis services tabular model. And the result, again, can either be used in Power View, Power Map, or simply in Excel using pivot tables. And, of course, you again can store it in SharePoint. So, what does it look like? So taking the Power Query from before, as you can see on the right side, you have the option to either enable download, load to worksheet, and at the very bottom, load to data model, which actually means integrate this table into my Powerpivot model. Once this is done, I can switch to Powerpivot, which is another ribbon in my Excel. I can manage it and have all the data right here. So the next step would be to add some more tables which allow me to do analysis. I mentioned before that when you're using Power Query, you can share that query and make it accessible for other users. So what I already have prepared is as a query, a predefined query, which we are analyzing countries, right? Where we have the population by country. So we may want to group them by continent or region or whatever. So I created a predefined query that delivers exactly this data. And by using simple search, I search my Power BI site for any data sources containing location. And now I can simply click it and add it to my data model. Takes a second, has to load it from the internet again. And there we go. Another very important thing that I just talked about before is that you can integrate any of your Excel tables into your Powerpivot model. So this is like a very simple table which features the years from 1950 to 2100, I think. And I calculated the column by simply going to the 31st of December. Of that given year. This is necessary for like time intelligence, as we will see later. So, and I can simply take this table and again add it to my data model. So now I already have like 3 tables, which are independent, but there is the diagram view which allows you to combine this data. So all your data have to have some information in common, like customer number, product number, a date column. And these are the columns where you link the data. So we would have our population table, which has a country code, which can be linked to the country ID. And we have a year, which can be linked to our years table. And that's basically it. Once we have all those relationships in place, we can create a pivot table and start analyzing our data. So we have population table, and I want to see the sum of all populations over like those 50 years and over all countries. So it doesn't really make sense to analyze 50 years altogether, so we usually filter by 1 year. And so we see in the year 1987, we have like 5 billion people living on the Earth. We can further divide this by continent. So, as you can see, most of them lived actually in Asia. No surprise. You can use any visualization that is available in Excel, like conditional formatting, stuff like that. I'll just do it here. So it's actually very simple. Which gives you a nice view of your data and how it is distributed. So then, what's also very important for Powerpivot is the ability to define calculations. So what I want to show is that what am I interested in from analyzing population data? It's probably like how was the growth in population compared to the last year. So Powerpivot features some pre-built time intelligence functions. In order to use them, we need to mark our years table as a dates table, saying that the date column is our date month. And then we can start our calculations. So we just say DAX is actually designed to work similar to Excel formulas. So if you're familiar with Excel formulas, it should be pretty easy for you to learn DAX. That's the idea. So what we want to calculate is the population of our last year. So which is basically we use calculate. We want to calculate something. We want to calculate the sum of our population for the previous year. And then we have to specify our dates table, which is years and date. And that's basically it. And now we can use this calculation. Should be able to use it. Let's mark the table. Okay, this was not planned to happen. So this should, as I said, show the population of the last year. I don't know exactly why it's not working. Well, anyway, we will continue. So this is how you create calculations, which can be used in any way. So it doesn't matter whether you use like the continent or the countries themselves. The calculation basically works in each context, like you used it from multidimensional or pivot table. That's the basic idea. Okay. What's also a very nice feature about Powerpivot is that you can create hierarchies. So usually if you do analysis, you want to start like in a very aggregated level and really you're sort of down to a deeper level with more details, which is usually done by using hierarchies. So we can create a hierarchy using the continent, the region, and the country. And then we can use that hierarchy and do our drill down. This hierarchy can also be used in like PowerView and all the other tools that we will see later. There are a lot of other features that come with Powerpivot, but the time is way too short to explain all of them. So we go back to the presentation. The next steps are our visualization tools, meaning PowerView and PowerMap. You already have seen both of them actually in the keynote yesterday. And from my point of view, they are like very similar in terms of both allow geospatial analysis, whereas like the difference is that PowerView is much richer in terms of visualization. So you can use charts, you can use tables, you can use slices and filters and stuff like that. For PowerMap, it's like only used for analyzing geodata. Therefore, it's much richer compared to PowerView. Another important difference is that PowerMap is not integrated into the web in any way. It's like stepchild of all the other Power tools. PowerView can be used online. It can be used in like a mobile app, and it's also used to preview the data, as you will see later. Short demo on the Power visualization tools. So first of all, we have PowerView. It integrates into Excel. It's like adding a chart. You just now add a PowerView report. Where you can use the data model that we created before in Powerpivot and say, okay. Oh, I think I know now why it didn't work. Sorry. Like the pivot table. Okay, there we go. Use the wrong color. So, okay. Going back to our Powerpivot report now, we may want to analyze our data by year. So, by default, as year is a numeric column, it tries to aggregate it, which is in this context not really correct. So we say do not summarize, and we want to use it as a slicer. So we select 1 year, and our report will be filtered on that selected year. So we can also use our continent. Here we go. We can also use the continent as a filter, as a slicer. So at this stage it doesn't really look any special. So let's add some data, meaning population data. We have our population, we have the population of the previous year, and what would be really interesting is some kind of growth, like how was the growth compared to last year. So we can always go back to our Powerpivot model and add a calculation, and the calculation is immediately also available in PowerView. So our calculation would be like growth. There is a special function in Powerpivot that handles divides. If you're from Excel, you know that you always have like division by 0 and stuff like that. So with Powerpivot, they introduced the divide function that handles this automatically for you. And we want to divide the sum of population by our last year's population. And we want to see it as a percentage. So going back to PowerView now, it says, okay, the model has changed. Refresh the data, and we have our oh yeah, sorry. And we have our growth measure. I'll try to add it to this table. So, and we want to analyze this by country. We want to see which one has the biggest growth or the smallest growth. We can easily sort it. It's basically fast because of Powerpivot. And of course, you could also convert it to a chart, whatever. And all this is fully flexible, so whenever you change one of the slices, all charts on the same sheet also change accordingly. I could like create much more sophisticated reports right now, but that's not the idea of the session. It's just to see how to use it, PowerView, and how it connects to all the other features. The next thing that I actually wanted to show was PowerMap. But taking a look at the clock, it's a bit behind in my time plan. So I will skip the PowerMap demo and continue with the collaboration features, because I think they are much more interesting, and according to your response to my previous questions, and most of you haven't worked with it yet or don't even know it. So collaboration is done in SharePoint Online. It's a special Power BI app which features the BI portal that aggregates and shows the data or the models, and it also hosts a Q&A. Q&A itself is a native language search, which allows you to search across all your models, all your Powerpivot models that you have deployed to your SharePoint, and returns data according to your question, basically. Then we have the mobile app, which is dedicated to be used on like touch devices like the Surface, iPad, whatever. And it's basically an HTML5 viewer of your Power View reports and Excel reports. I will show all those demos that I just skipped like all together. So for the Q&A, let's first of all explain what SharePoint Online is, or what we see here. This one is SharePoint Online. It's like any SharePoint 2013 that you may have hosted in your organization. You may have a document library there, you have a note there where you can take notes, share it with your colleagues. You may have a shared calendar there. So all things that you may need for collaboration. And there is one thing, that's, as you can see from the left, it's Power BI. That's basically the Power BI app. So what it does, it collects data all over, like that is stored in this specific SharePoint site, checks which of this data actually contains a model that it can use for Power BI, and then shows it here. On the top, you have the so-called Q&A, what I've been talking about before, which allows you to ask specific questions about your model or your data that you've uploaded. So you can, for example, ask, like this demo features two separate models. It's the Olympic Games. So we can just ask, like, get me the count of medals by class. Oh, not really surprising. And then we can say, okay, maybe I want to see it also by country. So Q&A automatically realizes it's a country. It may be able to show it in a map, and that's exactly what it does. It shows like how many medals the athletes of the different countries won. This is now overall, and you can also say for London. So these are now the medals in London, like last year. So I may be interested in how many medals I won by year for a given country. So, as we can see, it seems that the Swedish are doing pretty good. This one features only Summer Olympics, so if I would do the same for Austria, well, we are not that good. We are focused on the winter sports. So, it's really powerful. It automatically works with your data model, or is supposed to work with your data model. At the moment, this is still preview. And you have only those two models that you can like try out. So that's Q&A. Then we have the mobile app. For all of you who are using a Surface or have installed Windows 8 or Windows 8.1, you can download Power BI app from the marketplace. Okay, there we go. And you can define, first of all, you select your reports, right? So you connect to any SharePoint Online that you have access to. Pick any of the reports. You can preview them, and if you say, okay, the data or the content of that specific report is valuable to me, you can add it to your favorites and have it in the start screen. Okay. Let's take a simpler one. It does not yet support all types of charts. Basically, supports like line charts, bar charts. Probably the internet connection now. Oh, actually, it's working. So, if you, for example, would have a PowerView report, you could also show it on your iPad, on your Surface, or whatever device you may use, as long as it supports HTML5. It's same as in Excel. It's fully interactive. You can change whatever your selection, and it immediately refreshes. And if you like it, you can make it a favorite. You can unfavorite. It's just in this case, it's already a favorite of mine. And then they will show up and on your start screen, and you immediately see your data. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the administration part. There are basically two options that you have to share data across your application. It's either the way of using gateways and data sources, which is basically an interface for SQL Server tables, or you can use shared queries as I've showed you before. What's also very important here that you can use, you can define security and roles that have access to this data. What it actually looks like is that you have your data, an analysis services queue, the SQL database or whatever. You have SharePoint Online with Power BI, and you have your client, Office 365. So in order to use the concept of a gateway and connect directly to SQL database, you first have to set up a so-called gateway. This is done initially in SharePoint Online. So you set up a gateway, and you get a gateway key, which uniquely identifies this gateway. Then you have to install the gateway software on your client or on your server machine, where the data resides on, which is then linked or set up using the same gateway key. Then you can establish a connection. And the next thing is to set up a data source. So this server may host several databases, which I want to get data from. So I have to set up a data source, which more or less links the Power BI connection through to my SQL table, a SQL database. When the user, well, an important thing here, at the moment it's only supported for SQL Server. It doesn't support analysis services if you use this setup. So that's a limitation that hopefully falls pretty soon. So once you have set up the data source and the gateway, you can use Excel Power Query to, as you have seen before, use the search box on the right side, featured by Power Query, to search those tables. At first, this is only metadata, so you see which tables exist, with which columns they have. And once you have selected one of those queries, you basically connect to Power BI, which establishes a connection to the gateway, loads the data via Power BI to your client using OData. So this is one setup on how you can get your data. And the other one is, as I've said before, is using shared queries. So you basically create Power Query on Excel on your client. You share the query for your colleagues, within your organization. Then you, again, search for your data, because there's like all the data that is available is accessed using Power Query. And when you found it, you basically load the definition or the script of the Power Query to the client and execute it from there. And you do not have the limitation anymore to connect only to SQL databases. You can also connect to Hadoop or OData and so on. So going back to our SharePoint site, what does it look like to set up a gateway? Is it complicated? Oh, it was excellent. Okay. Can use that. So I go back to my start page, to my team site. And what we have here is the admin page, where you have a separate special button for Power BI, which is like the administration for Power BI. That's exactly where you set up gateways, set up the data sources, and have also the ability to monitor those data sources. In this case, I have one gateway, it's called My Gateway. If you take a closer look, it has one unique key, which is also used for the gateway itself that is installed on the client. I will show you this because it's actually installed here. So that's like a service that is running on the server that is connecting to my Power BI service to do all the communication. This one is already running. If I set up a new one, I just have to install it, enter the gateway key that is that I just showed you in Power BI, and then we are ready to go. Once we have our gateway, we need to set up a data source. So on the server that the gateway is installed, we may have like 5 SQL Server instances. So, and each data source is dedicated to one instance always. So when you set up a new data source, you first of all have to enable OData feed, which means that the tables or the data source actually shows up in Power Query. So the next thing is that you have to add the connection info, which is basically a name, my data source. It's always tied to a gateway. It's my gateway. You can select the provider. As I said, at the moment it's only supporting SQL Server. You have a server name and a database. You have to specify either you want to use Windows authentication or SQL authentication. What's very important to mention here with all connections that you do using the gateway, it's always in the context of a service user, so you do not have integrated security. I will use SQL authentication. So I have to add my credentials. Very simple here. So now that I have successfully established my connection, the next thing is to select the tables that I actually want to expose to my users. Because I do not want to expose all my tables, because it doesn't make sense for the user to download a, let's say, 2 billion fact table, 2 billion rows fact table. So I will not expose it. I will usually use some kind of views or abstraction layer for all those queries. And you can select each table. You also see some of them are grayed out. Not all like data types are supported at the moment. I hope they will in the future. So you select those tables. And the last thing that you can do not have to, is to create roles or actually specify which users actually have access to this data source. And that's it. Once this is done, it takes some time actually until this data is available. I have already prepared it. Other data sources for my promotion DB and AdventureWorks OLEDB. And as I said, you can now use Power Query to again the online search and search for data. I'm searching for promotion. You can say, okay, you want to search public data sources, you want to search only data sources that you have shared to your colleagues, or you can search data that is available within your organization. So I have already some tables here. So an admin user already set them up for me, and I can simply use them right here. And I have the data from this server, which is hosts the gateway. And it's in Excel, so I can use all the tools that we've seen before, Powerpivot, PowerMap, PowerView, and combine it with any other data from the internet or from any other source. Those are pretty powerful. The last thing is monitoring. So it's very important to know how often data is used and who uses it. You do not get out who uses it. So you see, when is a gateway used? How often is a gateway used? It also says what are the most expensive queries on that gateway. So there may be a query that kills the whole server. Or you may want to delete that query or do not share it anymore so this doesn't happen. This is all like administrative tools that you can use to monitor the usage. And what's really nice is that you can, like all this information is also exposed as OData, so you can re-import that data again into Power Query and Powerpivot and do your own analysis on the data that we see here. By default it features like those basic line charts, which are okay, but as I said, you can create your own visualization of that. That's for the gateway approach. If you use the gateway approach, the other approach is if you share a query, you also see who accesses this query. So if we go to our Power BI site again, you see in the right top there's Manage Data button, which shows the queries that you have shared. So my user has shared 4 queries at the moment. Some of them are used, some of them are not used. It says you can use each of those queries separately, get some insights, and you also have, this one's not used at all, and you also see what data sources you actually use. Where do you get your data from? Everything is in one place, it's in the web, it's online, it's accessible from everywhere, and it's pretty easy to monitor your data and your usage. Yeah, we are almost finished. I wanted to do a real world demo with more representative data. You've just seen like small sample data here. I'm unfortunately running out of time. It's already quarter past 4. So I'm finished. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, so this is the last session. I hope you have enjoyed SQL Pass Nordic. And well, safe trip home or wherever you're going. Thank you.